It landed in my inbox at 11:59 p.m. Subject line: Employment status update. My hands froze over the keyboard as I opened it, expecting a note about tomorrow's retirement send-off. Instead, the first line hit like a gunshot. Effective immediately. Your position is terminated. No thank you. No phone call. No handshake after 38 years. Just 12 cold words glowing in the blue light of my screen. I read them again, certain I'd misunderstood. My cursor blinked against the white page like a heartbeat I no longer trusted. Behind me, the city lights glittered beyond my window, mocking me, like champagne flutes raised at a party I wasn't invited to. I scrolled down, hoping for context. Instead, I found a single line at the bottom that twisted the knife. We wish you the best in your next chapter. Next chapter? As if my life's work could be reduced to a paperback cliché, I sat there, barefoot on my kitchen tile, staring at the email that erased nearly 4 decades of loyalty. In those years, I built more than systems. I built their future. When the company was a fragile startup with more dreams than dollars, I wrote the code that kept it alive. I sacrificed birthdays, anniversaries, entire seasons of my life, so their empire could rise. And this was how it ended. They called me a pillar in press interviews, featured my designs in glossy investor decks, behind closed doors. Though, I'd been branded something else. Legacy overhead. That phrase slipped out in a board memo last year, courtesy of Martin Holt. Martin, the golden CFO, 35, all charm and ambition, wearing Italian suits and that smug grin that never reached his eyes. He didn't believe in loyalty, only leverage. And tonight, he leveraged me right out the door. I could almost hear his voice saying, "It's just business, Tessa." But business doesn't send an email at midnight without warning. Business doesn't gut a pension plan one day before retirement to pad a quarterly report. I closed my laptop slowly, fingers trembling, not with fear, but with something colder, something heavier. The city lights outside still shimmered, but they didn't mock me anymore. They reflected something I hadn't felt in years, the sharp, unmistakable edge of resolve. Tomorrow was supposed to be my last day, but tonight had just written a different ending. I didn't sleep, not for a second. The words from that email burned behind my eyes like acid. Effective immediately. Your position is terminated. 38 years, erased in a single sentence. By 2:15 a.m., I was still at the kitchen table, laptop closed, staring at nothing. The hum of the refrigerator sounded louder than the city outside. Every tick of the wall clock scraped my nerves raw. I kept thinking, how do you measure a life's work? In code? In loyalty? Or in the ease with which someone deletes you? When the silence got unbearable, I went to the spare room, the one lined with boxes of old files and company memorabilia. I pulled out a box labeled Milestones. Dust clung to my fingers as I opened it. On top was an old company newsletter, its pages yellowing at the edges. The headline made my throat tighten, "The Woman Who Built Our Digital Wall." There was my photo, hair darker than, eyes bright with the fire of someone who believed her sacrifices mattered. The article praised me as the architect of the unbreakable backbone that carried the company to global dominance. I traced the words with my fingertip and almost laughed, because tonight, that same company had gutted me with an email at midnight. Back then, they called me indispensable. Now, a liability. Humiliation crept in. Slow and suffocating. It wasn't just the firing, it was the how. No meeting, no handshake, no gratitude for the decades I bled into their success. Just a sterile message ending with that cruel line, "We wish you the best in your next chapter." As if the chapter I wrote for them didn't matter. My phone buzzed. A notification lit the screen. LinkedIn alert. Against my better judgment. I opened it. Martin Holt had posted an update, polished, grinning photo, captioned, Proud to lead our bold new era of cost efficiency and innovation. Big changes ahead. Stay tuned. Underneath, the comments poured in. Great leadership, game changer, visionary move. I stared at the words until they blurred. They didn't know what those bold changes cost. They didn't know it was me. I slammed the phone down harder than I intended. It skidded across the table and hit a stack of old papers. A folder slid open. That's when I saw it. An old company deck I'd saved on a backup drive out of habit. Title: Operational Efficiency Q4 Plan. My pulse thudded in my ears as I clicked through the slides. There it was, in black and white. Phase 1. Pension Liability Reduction. Priority Accounts. Next to it, a list of names. Mine was first, highlighted in red. I sat back, breath shallow. They didn't just fire me. They planned this, calculated every step. Months in advance, to gut my retirement payout. That email wasn't business, it was strategy. Humiliation twisted into something colder, heavier. I closed the laptop slowly, almost tenderly, as if sealing away the last illusion I had about fairness. On the desk lay my old ID badge, its edges worn from years of swipes through security gates, for decades. That badge was a key, a promise, proof that I belonged. Now it felt like a relic from a story someone tried to erase. I picked it up, ran my thumb across the faded logo, and whispered to the empty room. If they think I'm just a line item on a spreadsheet, they've forgotten who wrote the code that built their kingdom. Sad, for the first time since midnight. My hands stopped shaking. The shame didn't vanish, but behind it, something sharper began to form. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter, more deliberate, resolve. By the time dawn brushed the blinds, the humiliation had hardened into something heavier. Resentment, slow, cold, deliberate. I sat in my home office, the company slide deck still open on my laptop, the one where my name glared in red under Phase 1, Pension Liability Reduction. They didn't stumble into this decision. They engineered it. And I knew exactly who orchestrated the blueprint. Martin Holt. Martin. Even his name felt slick. The kind of man who treated a handshake like a performance and a human being like a variable in a formula. 35 years old. CFO by the age of 32. A darling of the board. A golden boy for investors. The face they paraded in glossy magazines with taglines like, "The Future of Finance." I still remember the first time I met him, 3 years ago, striding into the boardroom in a tailored navy suit, Rolex flashing under the fluorescent lights. He introduced himself with a smile that didn't reach his eyes and used phrases like transformational synergy as if they were spells that could erase reality. Everyone nodded. I didn't. Where I saw people, he saw line items. Where I built walls of protection, he built exit strategies. Over the years, I heard the whispers, words like efficiency, streamlining, all dressed up as progress but dripping with greed. And then came the phrase I'll never forget, slipped out during a budget call: legacy overhead. At the time, I didn't know he meant me. Now I do. Scrolling through my backup drive, I opened an old email chain and found the proof. Martin's name at the top of a leaked thread. Tessa's tenure is admirable, but in this era, she's an expensive liability. Liability. That word hit harder than last night's termination email. 38 years reduced to a financial risk column. The irony? The very walls he hides behind were built by these hands that missed birthdays, holidays, whole pieces of a life to keep this company alive. I pushed the chair back and reached for my phone. It buzzed before I touched it. Another LinkedIn notification. Against my better judgment. I opened it. Martin again, grinning in a sleek headshot. Caption blazing. Proud to lead our bold new era of cost efficiency and innovation. Big changes ahead. Stay tuned. Beneath, A parade of applause emojis and hollow praise. Bold leadership, visionary move, game changer. I stared until the words blurred. They didn't know what those bold changes cost. They didn't know it was me. That's when the thought hit me. He wasn't just proud of cutting me out. He was building his empire on it. My firing wasn't a cleanup move. It was his victory lap, jaw tight. I reopened the company's public calendar, still cached in my browser. My eyes scanned the entries. And there it was, sitting like a taunt in black and white. Press briefing, 9 a.m., announcing historic restructuring. The notes beneath read like a eulogy disguised as progress, celebrating bold cost realignment, ushering in a modern era, eliminating outdated structures. I could see it now. Martin at the podium, cameras flashing, that smug grin polished to perfection. He'd call it historic. He'd call it innovation. He'd sell my erasure as a gift to the future. My throat tightened, but not with tears. Those were gone. This was something sharper, a clean, surgical edge of intent. 9 o'clock, just a few hours away. He thinks he owns the narrative. I closed the laptop gently, like sealing a coffin. My gaze drifted to the monitor in the corner, still glowing, still alive with lines of code I knew better than my own reflection, and for the first time all night. I smiled. If Martin Holt wants a show tomorrow, he's going to get one. Just not the one he planned. By the time the first streak of light slipped through my blinds, I had stopped counting the hours. My body sat in the same chair, but my mind was pacing, faster than the clock ticking on the wall. Martin's press briefing at 9 a.m. loomed like a warning bell in the distance, but I thought it was just an ego parade. I was wrong. I turned back to the laptop, fingers moving on instinct through my old backup drive. A folder labeled Horizon caught my eye. I clicked, and the screen flooded with threads of emails, proposals, technical diagrams. My breath hitched when I read the header, Project Horizon, Finalization Phase, and then the number. A string of digits that punched harder than last night's termination email. $200,000. A global contract with the International Trade Security Consortium, a deal that would crown the company as the undisputed leader in cybersecurity. Signing scheduled for 9 a.m., the same time Martin would be standing at that podium. The press conference wasn't just optics, it was theater, scripted to frame him as the visionary who brought Horizon home. My firing wasn't an afterthought, it was part of the act. I opened the attached documents, scrolling faster as my pulse climbed. Every bullet point made the stakes sharper. Horizon wasn't just another deal. It was a bet-the-company move. And the entire contract rested on Sentinel Vault. My system, my life's work. A bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. They wanted me gone. But they planned to lock the world's trust behind walls only I knew how to build. That was Martin's genius? Rewrite the credits while leaning on a foundation he didn't understand? The irony stung. For decades, I worked in shadows, building, patching, protecting, while people like Martin fed off the glow of headlines. Now he was feeding again. On the myth that progress means pruning the roots that keep the tree alive. I minimized the file and stared at the dim city skyline, now tinged with pale orange. Somewhere across town, Martin was probably rehearsing lines, straightening his cufflinks, imagining cameras flashing as he delivered words like historic, bold, and transformational. My gaze fell back to the monitor, to an email thread I hadn't opened yet. The sender, CEO. Subject: Tomorrow, you'll own the stage. I clicked. This deal will cement your legacy, it read. Make sure the optics are perfect. Legacy. My jaw clenched so tight it ached. They were gifting him the word they once pinned to me. I closed the email slowly, like it might burn through my fingertips. My humiliation wasn't an accident. It was a strategy. Erase the builder. Crown the showman. The clock on the wall read 5:39 a.m. Less than 4 hours until the world believed Martin Holt built an empire he couldn't even operate. For a long moment, I just sat there, listening to the silence hum around me, feeling its weight press against my ribs. The tension wasn't panic, it was precision. A taut wire stretched so thin it could cut, if they thought optics could save them. They'd forgotten one thing: Sentinel Vault doesn't run on headlines, it runs on trust, and every line of its trust code has my signature buried inside it. I turned to the second monitor, glowing in the corner, its interface waiting in standby. One command away from reminding them that foundations don't vanish quietly. I exhaled slowly, tasting steel in the back of my throat. 9 a.m. They plan to own the stage, but when that hour comes, the only thing flashing brighter than the cameras will be their silence. The second monitor glowed in the dim light, waiting like an old friend who'd never betrayed me. Sentinel Vault, my system, my fortress. To them, it's just a name in a prospectus. To me, it's a lifetime stitched in code. They call it a $375 million platform, as if money could measure what I bled into it. Sentinel Vault isn't software, it's a living organism. An adaptive AI spine wrapped in encryption so tight it laughs at brute force. It monitors millions of trade transactions every second, mapping anomalies, predicting breaches before they happen. The system guards the arteries of global commerce, silently keeping chaos out of the bloodstream. That's what they're selling to the International Trade Consortium today. That's what they'll brag about at 9 a.m., standing in the glare of cameras, flashing smiles they didn't earn. I ran my fingertips across the edge of the desk, letting the hum of the machine seep into my bones. Pride swelled in my chest, but it was jagged, cutting deeper with every heartbeat, because I remember how this fortress was built. It started 8 years ago, in a basement lab that smelled like burnt circuits and cold coffee, while the world slept. I lived under fluorescent lights, hunched over monitors until my vision blurred. I told myself the hours didn't matter, that missing a night's sleep, or 100, was a down payment on security, on permanence. I missed more than sleep. There was a birthday once. My son turned 12. He left me a voicemail that night, his voice cracking as he said, "It's okay, Mom. We'll celebrate later." Later never came. There was always another crisis, another patch to deploy, another layer to reinforce so nothing could break what I was building. I believed if I built something unbreakable, maybe the company would never feel as fragile as I did. And I succeeded. Sentinel Vault became their golden shield. They called me indispensable in board meetings, a visionary in investor decks. They gave me plaques, engraved pens, hollow words like, "We couldn't have done this without you." But plaques don't mean a damn thing when your worth gets weighed against a pension liability column. Now, Martin stands ready to claim my work as his legacy. A man who couldn't write a single line of the language pulsing through these servers. He'll call it innovation, as if innovation is born from press releases instead of blood and bone. My pride burned hotter, sharp enough to scorch through the bitterness pooling in my throat. They think they own Sentinel Vault. That's the punchline. They don't. Not really. I opened a folder buried so deep in my archive, it felt like unlocking a vault inside my mind. IP assignment, Sentinel Vault Core. My eyes skimmed past the legal jargon until they landed on the clause I'd memorized years ago. The one nobody bothered to notice. Ownership reverts to original architect if termination occurs prior to full contractual settlement. I read it twice, then a third time, savoring every syllable like a secret anthem. Termination without settlement, like the midnight email Martin sent me less than 12 hours ago. They didn't just fire me. They triggered a reversion clause that hands me back the keys to the kingdom. A laugh slipped out, low, bitter, edged with something dangerous. All their optics, their headlines, their choreographed historic restructuring at 9 a.m., built on a foundation of legal quicksand. I leaned back, staring at the soft pulse of the cursor in my command window. It blinked like a heartbeat, waiting for mine to steady. They thought they erased me. I whispered into the hum of machines. They just rewrote the rules in my favor. Outside, the first full light of morning broke across the skyline, gilding the city like a stage. Somewhere out there, Martin was rehearsing lines about progress and courage. Somewhere, a CEO was checking his tie, ready to toast a future built on betrayal. And here I was, alone, exhausted, bruised by every hour of this night, but holding the truth in black and white. The fortress they're about to parade doesn't belong to them anymore. My name is written into its bones. The clock read 6:10 a.m. when I rested my fingers on the keyboard. Not trembling now, steady, sure. 9 o'clock a.m. They plan to own the stage. But when that curtain rises, the only thing they'll own is the silence I leave behind. I wasn't shaking anymore. Not with anger, not with fear. Just steady, like the hum of the system glowing on my second monitor. Sentinel Vault pulsed on the screen, its interface breathing in soft blue light, lines of encrypted pathways stretching like veins across a digital body. To Martin, it's just a bullet point in a press deck. To me, it's a living organism, built with logic and instinct, and a fragment of something human. Trust. They think they own it. They don't. The truth no one in that glass tower knows is simple. Sentinel Vault was never complete. Not entirely. The core sequence, the checksum validator, never touched a repository, never existed in a file. It's here, in my head, stitched into memory. It wasn't sabotage, it was foresight, my insurance of honor, years ago, in a basement that smelled like burnt circuits and stale coffee. I wrote that line of code under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. It was 1:30 a.m., the kind of night where silence hums louder than machines. I remember the cursor blinking like a heartbeat as I whispered to myself, not for revenge, for protection. I trusted the company back then, but I trusted math more. The checksum was my ghost in the machine, buried so deep it blended with the walls. Its purpose was simple. If I walked away clean, it stayed asleep forever. If I didn't, if betrayal came, it would wake, and Sentinel Vault would know something was wrong. That moment came last night at 12:30 a.m., when HR revoked my access. They thought they locked me out. All they did was flip the switch I hid years ago. Fail-safe logic isn't dramatic. It doesn't explode or scream. It waits. Quiet. Patient. And then it whispers. Now. At 6:20 a.m., that whisper appears. A faint gray line blooms at the bottom of the interface, words almost too small to notice. Fail-safe mode pending activation. I stare at it, expressionless, while my pulse stays calm. It doesn't explain itself, doesn't warn of chaos. Just 5 words, a quiet signal that the balance has shifted. Most people would panic, but I'm not most people. I designed this skeleton. I know its bones. The fail-safe isn't revenge, it's truth in code. It will check what they broke when they broke me. And if the system decides the breach is irreparable, everything they built on top of it collapses. I move slowly, deliberately, opening logs, scanning the integrity queue. The hum of my cooling fan fills the silence. The cursor blinks, steady and obedient, waiting for my hands. My breathing matches its rhythm, controlled calm, chess in shadows. I click through the sequence markers, each line confirming what I already know. The process has started, and there's no pause button. This isn't about pressing enter. That key was hit the second they hit terminate. The clock on my wall reads 7 o'clock a.m. now. Less than 2 hours until Martin steps onto his stage. Cameras blazing, ready to declare a future built on a lie. I picture him rehearsing in a mirror, cufflinks gleaming, lips curling around words like bold and historic. He believes the world will cheer. He doesn't know the stage he's standing on is cracking beneath him, quietly, invisibly, because he thought cutting me out was the final move. It wasn't. I glance back at the screen. That gray line flickers again, like a secret only I can hear. Failsafe mode pending activation. It looks harmless. It isn't. I exhale slowly, steady as steel, and rest my fingers on the edge of the keyboard. Not to strike, but to wait. There's power in silence when you're the one who wrote the rules. 9 o'clock a.m. is coming. They think they own the story. But when the curtain rises, all they'll see is a stage gone dark. The city was still asleep when the heartbeat flatlined. On my second monitor, the soft blue veins of Sentinel Vault dim to gray. The whisper from earlier, failsafe mode pending activation, was gone. In its place, a starker truth bled across the screen. Integrity validation failed. No alarms, no explosions, just a single line pulsing in the center, like a verdict carved in stone. And beneath it, the quiet dagger. Contact original architect. My breath didn't hitch. My pulse didn't race. This was the ending I had written years ago, not out of spite, but out of survival. A lock no one could see until trust broke. The clock on my wall read 5:43 a.m. I'd remember that time forever. The minute silence tipped into a storm no one could contain. First came the pings, a soft chime, then another, then a rapid-fire cascade flooding my mirrored feed from internal channels. Urgent, Node 3 unresponsive. Is anyone else seeing transaction denial errors? WTF, global latency spike, lockouts everywhere. I scrolled faster, watching panic bloom in real time. All contracts on hold, urgent call in 5. Clients threatening to walk, escalate to Martin now. The irony tasted metallic on my tongue. For decades, I drowned in their crises, patched leaks at 2 o'clock a.m., rewired entire frameworks before dawn, sacrificed birthdays so systems like this never faltered. Now, the same machine they paraded as their fortress was folding in on itself because they cut out the one person who understood its bones. I glanced back at the interface. The diagrams were gone. No firewalls, no routing webs, no pulse, just that single, pulsing command like a ghost with teeth. Integrity validation failed. Contact original architect. 4 words had just undone 4 decades of arrogance. And then, like a match striking gasoline, the outside world caught fire. My news alerts lit up, one after another, screens washing in red banners. Breaking 375mm security system goes dark hours before 1.2B signing. Then the tweet from Global Markets Insider. International trade deal in jeopardy as core cybersecurity platform collapses. Stock futures plunge. Developing story. I imagined Martin reading that. Tie half-knotted. Coffee spilling as he lunged for his phone. The man who called me legacy overhead was now the face of the biggest systems failure in modern trade history. Cold satisfaction coiled through me. Not a rush, not a roar. Just a stillness deep enough to hear my own breath. I didn't cheer, didn't laugh. Because this wasn't chaos for me. This was math, logic, consequence. They wanted control so badly they carved me out. Now they're watching control evaporate line by line. Dawn pushed its way through the blinds, striping the room in pale gold. My apartment was calm, almost serene. The hum of my machine steady as continents scrambled. Funny how silence can roar louder than applause when you choose the right frequency. Another chime. A screenshot surfaced in my mirrored thread, forwarded like a corporate obituary. System lock message. Integrity validation failed. Contact original architect. They'd all seen it now. Board members, CEOs, partners across 3 continents. 4 words cutting through every excuse they'd spin today. I closed my eyes for 1 beat, let the weight of it settle. Then opened them to the clock. 6 o'clock a.m. The failsafe wasn't done yet. The cascade was still rolling, region by region, server by server. By 9 o'clock a.m., The meltdown would be complete. Martin wanted a spotlight. He'll get one, just not the kind he rehearsed for. I leaned back in my chair, steady as steel, watching the cursor blink against a gray horizon of silence. They wrote me out of their story, but at 5:43 a.m., the system wrote me back in. The meltdown wasn't loud here, not in my apartment, where dawn light spilled across the floor in thin, quiet stripes, but I could feel its echo in every frantic ping lighting up my mirrored feed. It was 6:15 a.m. when the first urgent banner flashed across the cache window. Emergency board call in 5. Wake Holt now! I leaned back in my chair, mug of cold coffee cupped between my palms, and watched the machine that once called me indispensable choke on its own panic. Then the video still appeared, a leaked screenshot from someone inside the loop. Martin's glass-walled office glared under fluorescent lights, every surface throwing back blue from a wall of screens. His tie hung like a noose, collar open, shirt creased in stress lines. He was mid-scream when the frame froze, jaw locked, veins straining at his temple. Below it, a transcript line scrolled, "This is a bug. Do you hear me? A bug. We'll fix it before the press briefing." More fragments tumbled into the mirrored thread. "Martin! The message says contact original architect. Who the hell is that referring to? Do not say her name in writing." I almost laughed. Almost. But laughter felt too warm for this moment. This wasn't triumph. This was geometry, the sharp, inevitable angle of cause and effect. My second monitor blinked again, dragging me into another storm, live headlines surging like breakers. Shares plunge 9% in 15 minutes as Sentinel Vault failure triggers global market panic. The stock ticker bled red across the screen, numbers sliding like a wound spilling open. A finance anchor's voice spilled through an autoplay clip, taut with urgency. This could derail the $1.2 billion trade deal scheduled for 9 o'clock a.m. Sources confirm executives are scrambling for answers as critical security systems remain offline. 9 o'clock a.m. 90 minutes until Martin's coronation turned into his crucifixion. I imagined him now, pacing behind that glass wall, jaw grinding, sweat carving paths along his collarbone. The man who wrote me out of the script was choking on his own lines. His hunger for headlines had just made him the headline. The mirrored feed burst alive again, snippets from the emergency call. "Martin, fix this or the CEO's taking the stage alone. You promised optics. This is a PR execution. Call the vendor. Call anyone. We need this contained before markets open." Contained? I glanced at the pale words still hovering on my local Sentinel Vault interface. Steady as a heartbeat. Integrity validation failed. Contact original architect. No spin could erase that. Not in 5 hours. Not in 5 years. The blinds quivered with a thin morning breeze as I scrolled through another feed. Trading desks in New York flaring red. Analysts tweeting meltdown predictions like vultures circling fresh bone. Then my phone vibrated. A quiet pulse against the wood desk, so soft it almost felt polite. I turned it over. Not a headline this time. A message. From an unlisted number. Tagged only as investor contact. "We'd like to talk." I read it twice. Not an accusation, an opening. The same board that signed my erasure hours ago was now leaning toward the shadow they tried to bury. Not for an apology. People like them don't speak that language. But for survival. I set the phone down gently, like placing a loaded weapon on velvet. My reflection rippled in the black glass of the screen, and for the first time since this began, I smiled. Not sharp, not cruel, just quiet, certain. The clock read 7:30 a.m. now. 90 minutes until Martin steps into the blaze he built with his own hands. 90 minutes until the word historic gets rewritten in blood-red tickers and broken deals. They wanted me invisible. They wanted me erased. Now they're about to learn what power looks like when it doesn't raise its voice, when it waits in silence and lets the world come crawling first. By 8 a.m., the sunlight spilling across my desk felt almost theatrical, warm, golden, utterly indifferent to the chaos shredding every corner of their world. My mirrored feeds glowed with desperation. The tone had shifted overnight from sharp commands to frantic pleas. Does anyone have her personal contact? Legal says we need her name before 9 a.m. Investor pressure was dripping through every thread like acid. Fix this now or the deal dies. I closed the feeds for a moment and let the silence settle around me. Calm tasted sharper than coffee. The phone vibrated against the wood, so sudden, so soft it felt almost polite. I turned it over. The name glared back like a confession. Martin Holt. I let it ring twice, maybe 3 times, before sliding my thumb across the screen. Hello, Martin. The voice that came through wasn't the CFO, who strutted across stages and spoke in billion-dollar sound bites. It was cracked, breathless, leaking panic through every syllable. Tessa, thank God! Listen, we need to fix this. Please, tell me what you want. Anything. I'll make it happen. I took a slow sip of coffee, watching the steam curl like a signature in the air. Anything? Yes, he rasped. I can authorize a full package, bonus, pension, reinstatement, public credit, whatever it takes. Just bring the system back online. My eyes flicked to the interface glowing on my second monitor. Sentinel Vault's message pulsed steady as a heartbeat. Integrity validation failed. Contact original architect. I told you once, I said, voice low and even. You don't have what it takes to buy back trust. Silence crackled on the line, broken by his ragged inhale. Tessa, don't do this. Think about your career, your reputation. I almost laughed, but laughter felt too warm. My reputation? I murmured. You fired me at 11:59 p.m. to make yourself look bold. How's that working out for you? He stumbled over words, piling them like sandbags against a flood. I was wrong, okay? I'll go public. Say you're indispensable. You already did, I cut in, glancing at the mirrored feeds flickering alive. Just not the way you planned. Because while Martin begged, the leak detonated. Slack threads erupted like wildfire, lighting my cache in real time. Is this audio real? Someone dropped the Holt call in Doxirk exec leaks. The guy who called her a liability is groveling. Karma's trending. Then came the screenshots, captions scrawled in pure internet glee. Martin Holt offering his bonus to the woman he fired. You can't script this. I pictured him in that glass box, walls closing in as his humiliation bled through every channel. The same man who reduced me to a line item was now a punchline in memes moving faster than stock tickers. His voice cracked again, thin as glass. Tessa, please, just tell me what you need. I placed my mug down gently, like a gavel sealing a verdict. What I need, I said, is something you can't deliver. Integrity. For a beat, there was only static, then the hollow thud of him exhaling defeat. I ended the call without another word. The clock read 8:45 a.m. 15 minutes until the press conference that no longer mattered. Headlines were already crowning him the architect of collapse. Investors were sharpening their knives. I leaned back in my chair, the soft hum of my machine steady in the quiet. They wanted me invisible. They wanted me erased. Now his groveling voice was the loudest sound in their empire, and I hadn't even made my move yet. By 8:50 a.m., sunlight had spilled across my desk like liquid gold, soft and steady against the blue glow of my screens. The feed still pulsed with chaos, Martin's voice echoing in a dozen Slack channels, headlines screaming collapse, stock tickers dripping red across financial networks. The man who tried to erase me was now trending worldwide under hashtags sharp as blades. Jaksh Holt Gate, Daksh Vault Fall, Sach Legacy Overhead No More. I should have felt triumph. But this wasn't the endgame. It was only the ashes of theirs. That's when my phone buzzed. Not with desperation this time, with intention. The number was unlisted. The preview short. We represent a private capital group. We'd like to make you an offer. I stared at the words for a long second, letting the irony settle like a slow pour of bourbon. Hours ago, I was disposable, an afterthought erased in a midnight email. Now someone was waiting in the wings, ready to write me back into the script in bold. I tapped open the message. Your expertise is beyond dispute. We want you to lead the next generation of security infrastructure. Full autonomy, unlimited resources. For the first time all night, my breath hitched, not with fear, but with the weight of it. Seconds later, another ping, a link for a secure voice call. I accepted. The voice that came through was calm, measured, silk over steel. Tessa Warren, it said, pronouncing my name like it belonged on marble. We've been watching the events unfold. What happened this morning isn't a failure. It's a signal that the old guard can't keep pace with minds like yours. I leaned back, cradling the phone between my shoulder and cheek, eyes drifting to the gray horizon of code on my monitor. Go on. We're prepared to fund a project that redefines digital security from the ground up. The voice continued. No bureaucratic chokeholds, no legacy anchors. We're talking complete autonomy, design, deployment, ownership. Ownership. The word struck like flint on steel, sparking something deep in my chest. For decades, I wrote code like prayers whispered into a void, while men like Martin turned my work into his headlines. Now someone was offering to make my name the headline. And your terms? I asked. Voice low. There was a pause, the kind that hums with weight before the hammer falls. There's only one condition, the voice said. The project carries your name, Warren Protocol. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words burn slow and deep. Warren Protocol, not buried in a contract, not an afterthought in a footnote, a future built on the name they tried to delete. Images flickered behind my eyelids, an old newsletter from a decade ago, the one that called me the woman who built our digital wall. Back then, recognition was cheap ink and hollow plaques. Now, it could be permanence, etched into systems that would outlive us all. They wanted me gone, I murmured, more to myself than to the voice. Now you want to build a future on my name. Not want, the voice corrected softly. Require. Vindication swelled, not hot and bright, but cool, heavy, deliberate, like a crown lowering onto my head in perfect silence. When do we start? I asked. The answer came without hesitation. As soon as you're ready. I ended the call and let the phone rest against the desk, its black glass winking back a reflection of someone I almost didn't recognize. Not erased, not reduced, rewritten. The clock read 9:00 a.m. On my mirrored feed, headlines detonated like flares. Press conference postponed indefinitely. Board considers emergency restructuring after 1.2B deal crumbles. Martin's face stared back from a freeze frame, eyes wild, jaw slack. The perfect portrait of a man devoured by his own ambition. I reached for my coffee. Cold now, but tasting sweeter than champagne. They wanted a story about progress. They'll get one, just not theirs. I whispered the words, tasting their weight like a secret turned sacred. Warren Protocol. By 9:15 a.m., the city roared awake, but inside my apartment, everything was still. My coffee was cold. The sun stretched across the floor in pale gold, and my screens pulsed with headlines like warning sirens. Board holds emergency session amid Sentinel Vault collapse. CEO cancels press briefing. Holt on the hook. The meltdown had grown teeth. Stock futures were hemorrhaging red, down 12% and falling. Analysts spoke in the clipped tone of people smelling blood. CFO Martin Holt could face removal within hours. The board is desperate to restore investor confidence. I sipped what was left in my mug and watched the empire Martin, built on borrowed power, tilt toward ruin. It didn't feel loud, not here. In the quiet of my apartment, it felt inevitable. The mirrored feeds glowed with chaos. Internal chatter scrolled like a live autopsy. Board is tearing him apart. CEO wants resignation before noon. Then, a transcript fragment from the emergency call. Martin, this isn't optics anymore. This is survival. Step down. I could almost see him, jaw locked, hands shaking beneath the table while his carefully rehearsed arrogance crumbled. The man who stripped me down to a line item now begged for a shred of mercy from people who once worshipped him, and mercy wasn't coming. A breaking alert slashed across the screen. CEO issues statement. Accepts full responsibility for oversight failure. The clip rolled automatically, his face polished, voice grave. This morning's events underscore our need for accountability. I take full responsibility. A neat little bow for the cameras. But the market didn't care. The damage was terminal. Journalists had already branded it. The Warren lockdown. My name, once erased, now carved into every headline. Not because I asked for it, because truth has a way of cutting through PR fog sharper than any spin. Then the real blade fell. A mirrored notification blinked in the corner of my screen. New file uploaded to exec-leaks. I opened it. And there it was. An email dated 2 weeks before my termination. Martin's name in bold at the top. Checksum protocol unverified, but delaying validation saves cost. Recommend termination of redundant resource ASAP to streamline expenses. I stared at the words. Cold as stone. He knew. He knew Sentinel Vault wasn't fully validated, and he cut me out anyway. The reactions detonated in real time. He knew. He risked everything to save pennies. Lawsuits incoming. Holt's done. Then the headlines flipped like a switchblade. Leaked email suggests CFO ignored security risks for cost savings. That was the final nail, not in a coffin, but in a reputation once built on polish and power. The mirrored feeds erupted with snatches of dark corporate poetry. Holt escorted out after heated exchange. Board votes unanimous. Resignation effective immediately. Social media did the rest. Hashtags sharpened into knives. Sack Holt exposed. Sack Vault fall. Sack board bloodbath. His face looped on every news outlet, eyes wide, tie askew. The perfect image of a man strangled by his own ambition. I set the empty mug down and let the silence bloom inside me. This wasn't triumph. It wasn't gloating. It was justice. Cold, measured, precise. For decades, Martin's kind wrote the rules in ink and blood. Profit over people. Credit over conscience. Today, the ink turned on him. Today, the blood was his reputation bleeding out across every screen on Wall Street. Justice doesn't always need a courtroom. Sometimes it needs a mirror and a microphone. The clock read 10:15 a.m. when the official memo dropped. Effective immediately. Martin Holt has resigned from his position as Chief Financial Officer for personal reasons. Personal reasons? I smiled faintly at the euphemism stretched thin as glass. The truth was already trending in neon red across the market. Legacy eats its own. Then my encrypted inbox pinged. Investor contact. Confirming readiness to proceed on Warren Protocol. Shall we draft terms? I leaned back, feeling the weight of the moment settle like a crown. Cool. Heavy. Inevitable. The company that erased me was bleeding out in daylight, clawing for breath in a storm of its own making. And me? I was about to write the future, in ink they'll never wash away. 3 days later, the storm had burned itself out. I stepped into a glass-walled office that seemed to float above the ocean. Beyond the windows, waves rolled in, long, quiet arcs, sunlight crowning the horizon in molten gold. For the first time in weeks, maybe in years, I felt still. Not small, not erased, whole. The hum of a waiting system filled the room, soft as breath. On the desk, polished steel caught the morning light and threw it back in silver streaks. A single nameplate sat at the center, like a verdict written in glass. Chief Architect Tessa Warren. I rested my fingertips on the letters, tracing the grooves like they were carved into bone. There was no applause, no cameras, just sunlight, silence, and the truth that couldn't be spun away. I had outlived their erasure. A soft knock on the door. An assistant entered quietly, tablet in hand, and placed it on the desk with a bow of professional grace. The contract glowed on the screen, a lattice of terms that read like poetry to someone who had bled through a lifetime of fine print. Equity stake, full creative control, unlimited resources, and the clause that mattered more than the zeros at the bottom line. Project name, Warren Protocol. My name, not in a newsletter, not in a speech, in architecture, in the spine of something that would stand long after the people who doubted me turned to dust. I signed slowly, the stylus gliding across glass like a blade cutting through the last tether to the past. When the digital ink settled, it felt like a tide receding, leaving the shore clean. The horizon open. For a moment, I let my eyes close. Behind them, fragments flickered like film reels spliced together. Nights of blue light bruising my vision. Cold pizza curling on cardboard, while code stitched itself into eternity. My son's voice on a voicemail saying, "It's okay, Mom." And that moment at 5:43 a.m., when the screen whispered a truth the board never saw coming. They thought firing me would close the book. All they did was hand me the pen. I opened my eyes to the present. A camera couldn't have staged it better if it tried. The ocean blazing orange and white beyond the glass. The desk gleaming. The world humming like a machine, ready to move at my command. If there was a camera, it would pull back now, linger on the nameplate, sweep across the horizon, and leave the frame burning with possibility. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. A reclamation of every hour they called too much. Every sacrifice they weighed in pennies. Every ounce of trust they mistook for weakness. The tablet chimed softly. A news alert bloomed across the screen. Global markets rally after Holt's resignation. Investors back Warren Protocol as future of cybersecurity. Another headline scrolled beneath it. Bold and merciless. The day trust fought back. I stared at those words until they blurred. Not from tears, but from something quieter. A piece so heavy it felt like gravity settling into bone. Outside, the sun had risen full, spilling fire across the water. Its reflection reached through the glass, touching the letters on the desk until they gleamed like molten steel. I whispered the closing line to no one but the sea, tasting each word like iron and honey. At 5:43 a.m., they learned the truth. Foundations don't retire. When they closed the door on me, I thought it was the end of my story. But that moment, the one meant to break me, became the line that rewrote everything. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Foundations don't retire. What you build with integrity will outlast greed every single time. Maybe you've been there too. Undervalued, overlooked, made to feel replaceable. If that's your story, let this be your reminder. You are not your job title. You are the work, the grit, the nights no one saw. And trust me, those who underestimate you today will read your name in lights tomorrow. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever faced a moment like this? A time when they counted you out and you came back stronger? Share your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to read it. If this video resonated with you, hit like. Share it with a friend who needs hope. And subscribe for more stories that prove power doesn't always roar. It sometimes whispers until the world can't ignore it.